Hi everyone, my name's Emma. Welcome back to the Champions of Wonder podcast. Today we're going to be talking about how to cope with what's going on in the world currently and just how do we deal with day-to-day life and move through the world with a better understanding of what's going on and how to just have a better outlook on it. When it comes to choices and decisions, the ones that we make with more intention will help us create the world that we want to live in. That's really what we talk about here on this podcast, is how can we look at all these lessons that exist all around us, whether we look at entertainment, our interactions with people, our own past, the past mistakes others have made. There's a lesson to always be learned, and if we do that and if we input those lessons into our lives, we can really create the life that we've always wanted. Now, we've all lived through quite a precarious year. We have had to experience constant changes. Things are still changing day to day. We're not even sure how things are going to look in the next week, let alone in the next year. So how do we cope with that? And we constantly see new reports about climate change, global warming, sea level rise, fast fashion, the changes in politics from day to day, the exchange of power, the news constantly seems to flood us with, bad news. So how do we cope with it? And the best way that we can really cope with it is to take a step back and understand that this is life and that everything that is happening is just a part of it. How bad some things are and how amazing some things are, both are equally a part of life, and that we all go through the human experience every single day. And whether some days are really amazing and some days are really hard, everything that we are experiencing is usually not for the very first time. Even what's going on with a pandemic, even what's going on with the climate shifting and changing and us figuring out the best way to live in society, morally, physically, spiritually, it is something that is constantly changing. If we look through history, there's been times of great poverty, of great famine, and then there's been times of great growth, whether we're looking at the Enlightenment age or we're looking at the Renaissance. After a really dark period, there's always a light at the end. And that is really what we're experiencing right now. We are in this cornerstone of the next 20, 30, 50 years are really going to determine the direction of humanity. And now that seems daunting, and that sounds like a lot of responsibility. And it really is when we look at it, but the truth of the matter is that responsibility of every single thing that's happening in the world that falls onto us, it more or less is not something that is completely fallen on top of you. Whatever is going on in your friend's life or even in your own life, the chaos that you constantly believe is happening is, for the most part, a lot of the times also created in our own minds. We have a perception of how others view us, of how others make us feel, and how others make us believe. And the thing is that everything really does begin and end in your own mind. And having a safe space to return to in your own mental space is really one of the most important things that we can do, and really understand that how we treat ourselves is really how the world is reflected back to us. If we constantly believe that the world is out to get us, that there's nobody nice and kind and everybody thinks badly, that's the world that we're going to attract into our lives. And the thing is, the way that the world exists only exists through our own perception in our minds. And so a lot of things can be taken from you, a lot of things can change, but the way that you view the world is something that no one can actually take from you. No matter what happens to you, no matter who comes in your life, who leaves your life, how you decide to view those situations is entirely up to you. And it may seem very difficult because we're constantly bombarded by the opinions and thoughts and beliefs of others, of what's going on in the world, but it truly comes down to how do we create a safe mental space for ourselves? And how do we do that? How is that a way to live life? How can we create that constantly in our minds? And it really comes down to how well do you know yourself? How well do you interact with your world? How often can you be present in the world that you live in? What is the way that you decide to go through the world and understand the world? Are you constantly seeking to be entertained by somebody else? Are you offloading the responsibility of how you feel onto others. Are you trying to find validation somewhere else? Are you trying to find happiness somewhere else? Are you trying to find somebody else who's going to tell you what decisions to make? Because when we do that, we offload that responsibility, feeling that we are making our lives easier, but we're actually making it harder. When we do what other people tell us to do because we think it's easier to just agree in that moment, you think it'll be easier in the long run, most of the time it's not. When we go against what we believe in our core selves, it usually hurts us the most. And in the end, it could hurt that other person, and we don't want to be doing that. Because the world and the horror that's going on in it is something that we continue to propagate at the minor level in our own lives. And when we look at what's going on with climate change, and when we see what's going on with a pandemic, the way that we view our own lives is probably reflected in how we see that. Because we could see the minimization of fish in the ocean as the opportunity to change our own lifestyles and to contribute to a better world by choosing to eat plants and choosing to buy less items. We could see it as this is an opportunity for me to change how I interact with the world when we see what's going on with it. If we see that people aren't taking what's going on seriously, if we see that people are just choosing to continue to live as if nothing's changed, those are also the people that usually are surrounded by this sort of angst, this anxiety, this constant complaining, because again, they're offsetting responsibility to somebody else. Well, somebody else is going to save the future. Somebody else is going to have to create a sustainable way to live, and I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon. And the thing is, we could either pioneer our own lives to reflect the world that we want to see, or we could hang back and hand that responsibility to somebody else. And when we hand responsibility of our lives to somebody else, we also give them the power to make us happy and to not make us happy. And oftentimes, when you hand somebody something, they can fumble the past. They can drop it, because usually what we have in our own lives, the items that we have, we give them more care. And when somebody else gives us something, we may or may not care about it as much because we don't have that emotional attachment to it. And your emotional well-being is something that you're well attached to. And if we are deciding to let the opinions and the thoughts and the actions of others get to us, what people think of us, what people say about us, the way they think we should live our lives, we're handing them the opportunity to also create the world. And we could either see what's going on in the world as an opportunity to change it in our own lives. And when you start to change, those around you will start to witness that and realize, hey, it is possible. If nobody in your life wants to take what's going on seriously by making changes in your own life, but you decide, hey, I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this because I think it's going to completely change the world. And tomorrow the world's going to be vegan because I'm currently vegan. If you do it because you believe that this is the world that you want to live in, and that's the world that you're choosing to create for yourself, there's a greater chance of other people seeing that it is possible. And being the first one to do something just allows other people to see, hey, it is possible. And it's usually that first step that's the hardest. And when other people say, hey, I can do it too, it creates more opportunity, and it creates that into just the new norm. Back 20 years ago, somebody being vegan was insane. But now it's something that almost every restaurant is marketing their menu around. It's saying, hey, look at these vegan options, or look at this. And new brands are coming out, and old brands are coming out with their own version of vegan products. And even 5 years ago, it was a completely different world. But those who wanted to be vegan and who wanted to create that space forged ahead and took the criticism aside and understood that the path I want to go on is the one that is going to bring the most fulfillment to me and ultimately those around me. And so when we take a step back and we look at what's going on, whether it's the pandemic, climate change, politics, other countries interacting with one another, the travel, everything that's happening is happening as an opportunity for us to do what we want to do. Many of us want to affect the world and to change the world, and we're constantly handed those opportunities. When we want to become brave, we are given the opportunity to do so. And that's really the most important part. When you see that you are constantly being afforded challenges and struggles, it is the opportunity for you to rise to the occasion and to become the person that you want to be. If you want to become independent, if you want to become an engineer, if you want to change your life, you are constantly given that opportunity. And those opportunities may come in people coming and talking to you and being negative towards you and leaving your life. But you can see that as an opportunity to create and allow even greater things to come into your life. So that's really the greatest way that we can deal with what's going on in the world, is to, at the micro level in our own lives, take responsibility back and realize that, all right, well, I can't get the whole world to stop eating fish to save the oceans or stop using plastic all the time. But in my own life, I can choose to use less plastic. I can choose to eat other food. I can choose to buy less items. We can choose to do that. And when we choose to do that, we are creating that world that we want to see. And understanding that our actions have consequences and our actions have power. Our emotional well-being, our financial well-being, it is all within our domain, and we can change it every single moment through every single choice that we make. And one of the things that we always talk about is the understanding that the choices that we make have consequences, and that those consequences can be good or they can be bad, or they can progress us. And that's really the thing. If we see our actions as good or bad, that's also not helping us. They're either taking you closer to the place that you want to be or further. And if we readjust and realize, okay, this action isn't good or bad, the way I behaved, all of this, it's not good or bad. It just is or is not bringing me closer to the person that I want to be, to the values that I want to live out. And the thing is, we all can learn from those decisions that we've made in the past. And if we're not learning, then we're not growing. And the world that we see around us is just going to continue to go into that direction that we don't want it to, because we're constantly handed those opportunities to become that version of ourselves that we want to. If we want to become successful, we're going to be given opportunities where we could be successful. And the thing is, we need to do that. We need to make that change in our own lives, and we need to do it every single day and all the time. And that's really the thing. We need to make sure that we are taking advantage of every single moment that we can make a decision and make a better one. We need to do that. We have to do that. And the thing is, it's all up to us. So now we're still looking at the TV, and it's hard to look at it. It's hard to see what's going on in other parts of the world. So how do we cope with that? Well, we can choose to not see what's going on and be left in the dark about what's happening, or we can accept that beginning to see what's going on is actually giving us the understanding that there's so much that can be done. And it is difficult to watch the documentaries and to watch the live shots of what's happening in the explosions and the change that's going on in the world, and that we can fall into this belief that there's just no good. And oftentimes on the news and in articles and documentaries, they don't often show the people on the sidelines who are rushing in to help. They don't show the people who are risking their lives to help people. And the thing is, at the core of everything is humanity. And there's always a human soul at the other side trying to help. And we have to believe that. And oftentimes the news isn't going to show that. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it does show a good Samaritan deed. And the thing is, there's a lot more of that in the world than they're showing us, than they're broadcasting, whether it be in entertainment, in movies, on the news. It does exist, and we have to believe in that. That is the hope of the world. That is the hope that exists in humanity, when people risk their own lives to help others. And that is what's beautiful about humans, and that at one point or another, people do that. People choose to do that. So we can surround ourselves with those stories. We all definitely need more positive stories in our lives, because we just usually are bombarded with too many negative ones, just showing one side of the story. And that's what we really talk about is perspective. You need a lot more perspective than we're handed every single day. And you can find that. You can find that all over. And even when people are broadcasting this stuff, they are taking this moment to show it and to share it. And it's difficult, but knowing what's going on out there is much better because you're not living with this lack of understanding of what's going on in the world. When you understand the world, then you can actually take steps to change it. And when people say they live with hope, that is what they're saying. They live with the belief in humanity. That is what hope really is. And that is how we should view hope, that hope exists in all of us in that capacity, and that there is hope for the future, that humanity and that part of people who want to help each other, who want to help themselves, exists and will prevail. And throughout history, that is the part of the humanity that has prevailed. And we need to believe that, and we need to live that out. And every single time you choose an action that aligns with helping yourself, helping others, helping the planet, and those choices include not eating animals, buying less products, making better choices, having less things, going outside in nature, spreading kindness, and being present. Those are the things that will bring us and let us live in that hope and let others believe in that as well. So that's really one of the best ways to cope with what's going on, is to understand that this isn't the full story. And when you're constantly gaining perspective, you can begin to see that. Whenever somebody tells you a piece of information, whenever somebody tells you a side of a story, they're telling you that. They're telling you a perspective, and all perspective is limited. And when we can acknowledge that, we can say, you know what? It's sad what's going on in the news, but that's not the entire story. It is sad, and for a lot of that story, it is sad, but there is hope on the other side. There is people who are risking their lives to help, and the more perspectives we get about what's going on, the more we can make better decisions. And the better the decisions we make, the ones that are in line with who we want to be, those are the decisions that we want to be making, because every decision either brings you closer to who you want to be or further. And the choice is ours, and it always has been. And that's really just another way to cope with life. It's saying, I have power over my own life, and I have the responsibility to acknowledge that and to bring forth that power and to move forward and to overcome what's going on. I have the power and the responsibility to do that. So instead of handing over responsibility to others of how you should feel or act or do with your money or travel, take that responsibility back. Understand that everything you're seeing is just one perspective of the story, and that a lot of times what's going on is just one version of the story. And because it's only one version, there's an entirety that we don't even know about yet. And at the end of the day, we can always take a step back and reconnect with ourselves, with our values, and with the way that we live our lives. And when we get bogged down with what's going on, it's because we lost touch with why we are doing the things that we are doing. If we need to take a break, we should take it. But during that break, we should take the time to really reevaluate why we are doing what we are doing, and understand that if we feel like we've burned out or we can't deal with it or we can't watch the news anymore, it's probably because our values are no longer in front and center of what we are doing. We're no longer seeing every choice that we make as bringing us closer or further. We've distance ourselves from the person we want to be, and that gap has created this idea of a burnout. Because if we create a life that we don't need a vacation from, because we're able to live in those moments, and there's part of every day that we have to do things that doesn't bring us the greatest joy ever, but how we approach it, how we view it, is our choice ultimately. And no matter what's going on in the world, no matter what's happening, no matter where it's happening, how we choose to view the world and how we choose to move through it is ultimately our choice. And this past year has been a test on all of us, and we can see it as the opportunity to let go of what was working, let go of what wasn't working, and hold on to what was working, or maybe come up with new ways and understand how coping mechanisms like going into escapism or any other form of getting away from your own reality is just bringing us to a place of discomfort and sadness and hurt, and we don't want to do that either. We don't want to live life and create a life that we want to escape from constantly. But if we live a life that is authentic to who we are by choosing to make decisions that bring us closer, and that will bring us ultimately to the person that we want to be. And we won't have to create new coping mechanisms every time something happens. We won't have to go to food as comfort. We won't have to go to shopping for therapy. We won't have to relax by watching entertainment. Those things will be built into our habits every single day. And because of that, we can move forward through life. But until we do that, until we realize, you know what, this is what's happening and this is how I have to move through it, we're just going to be bogged down by the world. And the world is going to continue to get more and more involved with what's happening with global warming, and we're going to be exposed to different versions of politics and what's going on with different wars across the world, and those are difficult things to deal with, and we need to be able to deal with it by looking at it and understanding this is one perspective, and we need to gain perspectives, and we need to let go of the idea that life is perfect, that there's only one way to do something. You're going to live and you are going to learn if you are living life in a way that is the most effective. We are not going to be the same person that we are right now, that we will be in 10 years from now, but only if we're actually working on ourselves and trying hard to let go of beliefs that don't work for us, letting go of thoughts and decisions that you've made before that you are very well aware that aren't working for you. And then you will be able to see things in your life and deal with it right then and there, and then move on. Because we constantly bottle up what's happening, don't process it, escape through entertainment, food, drugs, alcohol, and then we fall back and realize everything comes crashing down, and now you have to deal with those emotions anyway. And if we can at some point learn how to process things pretty quickly after they've happened, we will become much better at dealing with life and moving through life and overcoming life in the greatest way possible. And these coping mechanisms will become just another habit that we do. They will become the little steps that we take every day to bring us closer to ourselves. And when we hold on to that understanding that life is exactly what we make it, we'll understand that what's happening is just another opportunity to create the version of our lives that we want to see. We can all take responsibility and we can all move forward. Hope you got something out of today's podcast. We will be talking more about the world, lessons, what we can learn from the world that we live in, and just moving forward, taking on responsibility and accepting that life is truly what you make it. Hope you tune in next time, but until then, have an amazing day.